Welcome to the Non-Essential Podcast. I'm Steve Gibson.
I'm Ben Matlock. Hi.
We both sound excited to be who we are.
I'm not.
It's like, I'm Steve Gibson. Damn it.
I'm fucking tired
hoping I'd
as hell.
Wake up as somebody else today, but...
Yeah.
I'm not tired today, but I've had no clue what day of the week it is all frickin' day. Like...
It's recording day, fool.
Yeah.
Get hyped. Get hyped for two guys who only kind of want to be here.
It's just marginally better than anything else we have going on Thursdays.
Can we get some yawns in the chat, huh? Let's get some yawns. No, it's been kind of a long stretch at work, and it's going to get even longer, so half-assing it today. You get back-to-back creepypastas. Aren't you guys lucky? And today's pretty long, so we're going to get right to it. But if you haven't listened to our show before, Non-Essential Podcast, we essentially just tell each other stories, and they can be about whatever the fuck. And a lot of times we steal those stories from the internet, and here we are again.
And then we completely rip apart the authors and point out how stupid they are and that they should never write another thing again.
It is funny. Like, last week's episode, after we recorded, I felt like, man, I was such an asshole. And I don't know if I want to even put this one out because I was such a dick about the writing. And then I edited the show and heard the story again. And I came away like, no, I'm totally vindicated. That sucked. But this week, this one's a Pasta of the Month winner from the Creepypasta Wiki. I don't know what month or from what year. But this story is called The Devil Game. It's by a user named Infernal Nightmare 333.
Sounds like Monopoly, actually. Yeah.
The Devil Game. The ultimate Devil Game. Mm-hmm. Sell your soul for Boardwalk. Pray, for devils have no reason. Satan waits to curse your ways. Have you seen it in his eyes in the sunset? Have you wondered if he's laughing when he plays? That's from Kansas, the Devil Game. This is a set of instructions for how to speak with the devil, which, as those of you with any sort of brains at all might note, is a patently moronic proposition on the face of it, one likely to culminate in any number of thoroughly unpleasant fates. Honestly, it would probably be smarter to publish your credit card number on Facebook or take up a career in crocodile wrestling.
There's a lot of people that crocodile wrestle.
Yeah. I like that he does like two things that are like maybe not smart, but like survivable. You know,
right.
Like certainly not like, you know, hey, instead of doing that, like, I would get it if he was like, hey, maybe instead of selling your soul to the devil, you jump off a bridge or something. Like,
yeah,
something that's more surefire to me, bad. But then that isn't going to stop you, is it? Not if you're sincerely interested, at least. Technically, if you do everything just right, there's a fair chance you'll walk away scot-free, and that seems to be reason enough for some people to decide that it's a good idea. Especially if you're the fate-tempting, thrill-seeking scare junkie type. Or the desperate type. Which brings me to a point of clarification I ought to make. This is not a manual for making any kind of Faustian bargain. You know, the whole sell your soul type of deal. Although if you happen to bring it up in conversation, he certainly wouldn't be one to refuse. Following through with such a foolhardy bargain, however, would necessitate removing some of the protections which you will put in place for your conversation. And I don't think I need to spell out for you why that would be a bad idea.
Because you've all seen Supernatural seasons 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 9, 10, 11, and 13.
No, I'm all sure you guys have watched TNT at 4 o'clock and Supernatural. If you're really mathematically impaired enough to want to trade something that will last an infinite number of years for something that might last about 90 tops, there are plenty of other rituals out there for you to follow. This one, if performed correctly, should only allow the two of you to talk. This perhaps begs the question of why exactly would you want to speak with the devil in the first place? Maybe some of you just like the idea of making small talk with extremely dangerous occult entities. But for the sake of the human race, I hope most of you aren't quite that stupid.
Frankly, it sounds like a step up from Twitter. Like,
this guy does a lot of thumbing his nose at, like, hey, you know, I'm going to provide this service for you, although you'd be a fucking idiot to want this. It's a really weird sales tactic.
Yeah, I've clearly done this myself, but anybody that wants to do it's a frickin' moron.
And I would hope you wouldn't be so fucking stupid to buy these steak knives, ma'am.
Although that's intriguing. I'd pretty much immediately say, I want a set of those steak knives. You can't tell me not to buy them.
Ma'am, if you don't buy them, I'm throwing them in the fucking trash where they belong, to be clear. You would have to be an idiot. Short answer is, he knows things. Things that some of you may have a deep vested interest in finding out. I mean, he's not omniscient or anything, much as he might like to pretend otherwise. He's not God, but he's definitely got a supernatural advantage over the kind of knowledge any human would be able to obtain. For example, he probably wouldn't be able to predict when the next world war will happen, or tell you the cure for cancer, but he could very well be able to predict the winning numbers of tomorrow's $500 million Powerball drawing, or tell you what deadly undiagnosed condition might be afflicting one of your loved ones. Of course, the Prince of Darkness doesn't just go around giving out winning lottery numbers to anybody who asks, and trusting any sort of information obtained from a being commonly described as the father of all lies is liable to land you in a worse situation than you were in when you started. However, if you're really dead set on finding something out and you've exhausted all other options, there is a way to try to get accurate information out of the guy. You see, like so many of the more urban villains in popular culture, the devil has a bit of a penchant for games and gambling. This is like starting off a James Bond movie. It's like, now James, if you're going to get information out of him, you got to play cards.
Blackjack's the game. You heard of it?
Of course, the reason he likes them so much is that he almost always wins. Unless you happen to be a fiddler named Johnny or are being represented by Daniel Webster, you're probably going to get your ass handed to you. But if you're determined enough to want to face the risks and the long odds, there's a certain game the two of you could play to try to win the information you need. First things first, though. We'll start off with a description of the summoning process, then get into the rules of the game, some tips for how to play, and finally, of course, the inevitable litany of arcane shit that might go horribly wrong. In order to contact your conversational partner, you'll need to go to a church at midnight. It doesn't matter what kind of church, large or small, old or new, liberal or conservative, just as long as you're sure it will be empty.
What if it's somebody named Church's house? Or like Church's chicken?
That counts. That's a holy place.
I'd rather go there. Yeah.
The last thing you want is for some preacher to walk in on you while you're in the middle of this, for the sake of the preacher's well-being as much as your own. The process will probably work best if you try it on a new moon or a full moon or Friday the 13th or Halloween. The actual day is less important than the psychological effect it has on you. As long as you don't try it on Christmas Eve or something stupid like that, you should be fine. You're summoning a demon and he's going to be like, not tonight, I'm with family.
Santa Claus is oh, damn it, I forgot.
The devil is like, I gotta deliver these presents. There's no way I can stop at every fucking church right now. The time is important, though. You don't have to start or end your ritual at exactly 12 a.m., Greenwich atomic time or anything, but as a general rule of thumb, you ought to show up a bit before midnight and have everything set up by no later than 10 or 15 after. Show up a lot, but there's a lot of casual wiggle room. It's very like corporate America. Like you're not waiting until it's 15 minutes past the hour.
And I like how it starts off specifics. Like you got to go to church at midnight, but any church will do it. It doesn't matter what kind or where it's at or what it looks like. And,
again, this
and
is
you
like
gotta,
the orientation, and then after a week on the job, your manager's like, I don't actually give a shit.
Yeah, you find out your manager's just a big like stoner that's like, yeah, you get there, yeah, any church, whatever, that's fine, and it's got to be on Friday the 13th or a new moon or an old moon or Wednesday or really any day except Christmas Eve. That's fine.
We don't got to
be there at midnight or a little before, maybe a little after. Like, I like it. Like, the devil seems like a casual dude.
Yeah. Notorious slacker, Satan. Show up a lot before. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say he's just the like their college like friend that you could just show up at his dorm whenever, and he'd just be like, "Oh yeah, dude, come on in."
Yeah,
like that's cool.
Yeah, you can take the couch. I don't give a shit.
Yeah.
Show up a lot before midnight if you don't know how you're going to get in. Shockingly enough, most houses of God do tend to lock their doors at night, at least if there's no one there to watch over them. And remember, we want empty. Got it? There are, of course, certain things you need to bring and certain things you can't bring for this ritual. You will need a full can of salt. You won't need to use all of it, but it's always better to have more than you need than to have less. 7 candles, red or white being preferable. Something to light the candles with. You would be shocked how often people forget this. Occult ritual or not, they aren't going to magically light themselves. A length of red string, rope, yarn, or thread. A full-length floor or wall mirror. Ideally, you'll want to find one of those already present in the church. They're a bit unwieldy to be lugging around with you during a break-in. However,
yeah, that's exactly what I was picturing. You're juggling these candles and string and salt and whatnot, and a full-length mirror. Yeah. And then you're trying to casually, without anybody notice, break into the church. I guess that's a good cover, though. If somebody's like catches you, they're like, "Hey, what are you doing?" You're like, "I'm a cook installing the cooking mirror." And they're like, "Oh, okay."
Look, I'm really fucking late delivering this mirror. I was supposed to be at like 4 p.m. However,
this candle and salt are my gifts to make up for being so late.
We specialize in church shipping, and clearly business isn't going well. So if you'll excuse me, sir, I got to drop this off. However, if there really aren't any there, you'll have to bring your own. You might also find it useful to bring some markers, pencils, paper, a flashlight, and any sort of tools that might be necessary to secure your entrance into the church. It's like first day of school.
Right.
You will not be permitted to bring in any electronic or timekeeping devices. This includes all cell phones, smartphones, tablets, e-readers. This is just jury duty at this point.
Yeah, and who's not permitting you? Like,
the dark beast.
All right, pass your phones up. I said no phones in class. You'll get them back at the end of the day.
The devil hates e-readers. MP3 players, PDAs, calculators, wristwatches, pocket watches, kitchen timers, hourglasses, etc., etc., etc. Seriously, it's worse than the SAT.
Now I'm tempted to try this ritual, but bring a sundial in just to see, does that count as a timekeeper? Be like,
the fucking devil would show up and be like, "Okay, smart ass."
He starts talking, and halfway through you go, "Oh, look, motherfucker, I brought a sundial. Ha! Gotcha." And he'll say, "No, you won the game."
"Oh, I'm taking your soul, you fucking smart ass idiot." If you're one of those people that has your smartphone practically wired into your brain, don't worry. You can bring those things with you to the church as long as you leave them outside the room in which you will be doing the ritual. If you brought a flashlight, helpful for finding your way around without attracting unwanted attention, leave that outside too.
How is a flashlight helpful for not attracting unwanted attention? Because there's nothing more obvious than somebody's like broken into this building than seeing like
a flashlight
beams instead of just like turning the lights on. Like,
well, you're leaving that. You're specifically using the flashlight to break in. So, that's, once you're in, you have to leave it outside. So, I mean, it might draw attention, but no more attention than you lugging a giant mirror through a broken window.
Fair enough.
Also, don't bring in any sort of religious paraphernalia to protect you, especially if it pertains to the Abrahamic religions. And yes, if those gothy black cross earrings you're wearing are hanging right side up, they count. If you have any kind of holy symbols like that with you, the devil will simply refuse to show up. Don't worry, you're not going in totally unprotected. In fact, most of the supplies with you are not for any sort of devil summoning ritual, but for your own protection. Old superstitions and folk magic remedies to guard oneself from evil. From what I know of it, the effect's mostly based on the power of belief, so there are probably numerous other objects, artifacts, and procedures that would work just as well. If you'd like to risk being left helpless at the mercy of the devil in order to test that theory, feel free to experiment.
I'm going to try it with my blankie and a teddy bear.
Yeah. Let's see if you could just fend him off with a big stick. However, for anyone without a psychotic death wish, I'd recommend sticking to the ritual as follows. Once you're you're already putting yourself in a position where the devil could kill you just to talk with him. I think you already have a bit of a psychotic death wish, but sure, we'll keep looking down on idiots here. We're the smart devil summoners.
And again, my confidence isn't going sky high because still about 90% of this is like, don't do this, or you can. It's really not that important. Mm-hmm. Like,
it's very casual. All he asks is that you wear jeans and Hawaiian shirts if you do it on a Friday.
Bring salt, a full can of salt, or maybe one of those Salt Life stickers. Like, just whatever.
Maybe a nice salsa dip. You know, as long
as it's salty.
Something you can whip up real quick. You know.
No guacamole though. The devil will look at that shit and be like,
guac. It's not a whole. It ain't Cinco de Mayo. Okay. Once you're sure you have all the right supplies with you, make your way into the church and find some place to set up. It can be anywhere from the main sanctuary where services are held to a Sunday school classroom to a walk-in supply closet. Which would be really sad to do this like really elaborate devil summoning thing, and you do it in the fucking supply closet.
Especially since the devil would show up and I'd be sitting there eating like glue sticks or something.
Yeah,
like
I'm just huffing cleaner when he shows up. As long as you have a sufficient amount of open floor space and are certain not to be disturbed, set up your mirror first. This is where the devil will appear when you summon him. As such, you mustn't complete the summoning until you've laid down certain wards around it. First, surround the mirror with an unbroken circle of salt. If the mirror is hanging on a wall or door, lay down a semicircle around it instead, making sure that the salt touches the wall at both ends. Then wrap your red string around the mirror several times. The color red, especially red string, is a symbolic protection in the folklore of many cultures and religions. This is also why red candles are a good idea. Speaking of the candles, set them up around the outside of your circle or semicircle of salt, spaced at relatively even intervals. No, you do not have to get out measuring tape and make it exactly perfect, but do at least try to make it look as though it was set up by someone old enough to be trusted with matches.
Because the devil it's like, that's one of those things that's not a supernatural thing to arrange it. It's just the devil shows up and it's all sloppy. You'll be like, what the fuck is this? I'm out of here.
Oh,
like,
no.
You obviously don't.
Chris Hansen's about to come out. A kid did this. Oh. Sorry, I lost my spot. Just the matches. Light the candles in a clockwise fashion, being careful not to disturb the salt. If you break the circle, you'll have to start all over again. Once all of the candles are lit and burning strongly, your protective wards are complete. You are now ready to proceed the actual summoning. To do so, you first must get the devil's attention and demonstrate your resolve by performing some sort of sacrilegious act in the holy space. Turning a crucifix or cross upside down is fairly conventional.
I thought you couldn't have crosses on you, though, because it's
a church.
Yeah,
there's gonna be some. It's
just, you can't bring in outside, because if he's like, nope, this isn't part of the
decor. You can't be repping Jesus on your person.
I see.
But you can fuck with that shit, you know, because the devil will be like, oh man, this guy's punk as hell. He's flipping crosses around and stuff. He don't give a fuck. For example, I know of a kid who once fulfilled this requirement by scribbling obnoxious graffiti all over a painting of Jesus hanging in his Sunday school classroom. The nice
now
thing,
the devil shows up. It's like, that's fucking awesome, dude.
Man, you put a dick on the painting. That's awesome. The nice thing about turning a cross upside down is that once you've finished your encounter, assuming you've survived it in one piece, you can just flip it right side up again and no one's the wiser, sidestepping the relatively minor but still irritating risk of having your Sunday school turn into a reenactment of the Spanish Inquisition for the next month and a half. After you finish doing whatever offensive thing you decide on, shut all doors to the room and turn off all the lights, so that the space is lit only by the candles. Face the mirror and stare deeply into it, concentrating on your desired outcome. There are no incantations, no arcane strings of Latin you have to recite. Just look into the mirror and wish as hard as you can for the devil to appear there. After a few moments of this, when you feel ready, close your eyes and count to 10, then open them. If all has gone correctly, you will no longer see your own reflection. You will be looking at the devil, or at least looking at the way the devil has chosen to appear to you. Chances are he won't look like your conventional red-horned demon with goat legs and a pitchfork, nor any other sort of terrible apparition. No point in scaring you off now. Better to lure you in, make you feel safe.
So he looks like Colonel Sanders.
Yeah. For me, he would look like that crazy crab. To that end, he generally takes on the appearance of a fairly average, nondescript human being. If anything, he's prone to vanity and will lean towards the more attractive end of the spectrum. The only really frightening part of him will be his eyes. No matter how hard he tries, he can't hide the sinister gleam smoldering deep within them, the malevolent amusement and hunger, like the eyes of a spider contemplating a fly struggling in its web. All right, that's a good sentence. That speaks to me and my fears. So they're supremely confident, those eyes. Confident and without pity. Don't look into them too deeply or you'll begin to feel helpless and paralyzed with dread, losing your hope and your will to fight. Since you'll probably be just standing there staring at him in shock for a few moments, having on some level expected for the ritual to fail, he'll initiate the conversation by asking you what it is you desire from him. If you can gather your wits enough to string together a coherent sentence, you should respond with something like, I wish to challenge you in a game of question and response. Even if you don't get the words exactly right, he'll know what you mean, and he'll accept your request with a wide, predatory grin of anticipation. He's been playing this game for a long time, you see, and he's very good at it. Most humans, on the other hand, are very bad at it. This gives him a chance to, at the very least, thoroughly mess with your mind, and at most, well, we'll save that for the litany of shit that could go wrong. You'll have to play it very smart to avoid justifying his expectations. The general rules to the game are very simple, with a few caveats that can make things more complicated. He'll begin it by asking you a question. He always initiates the game. It can be anything from a piece of obscure trivia to a riddle to an extremely personal inquiry. Don't worry, you won't be immediately plunged into hell if you get the wrong answer or anything like that. As a matter of fact, he won't even tell you whether you got the answer right or wrong. After you've answered his question, you get to ask him one in return. Now, here's where the consequences of your response come in. If you answered his last question correctly, he will respond to your question as honestly and accurately as he is able. However, if you answered it incorrectly, he is free to lie to you as he sees fit. Perhaps if you asked him something you're better off not knowing, he'll tell you the truth about it anyway. More likely, he'll feed you the most insidious, damaging lie he can come up with. Either way, after he's responded, he'll ask you another question, and the process will repeat over and over again until you decide to call it quits. Now, you may be sitting there thinking that it sounds fairly easy to get the information you need. All you have to do is wait for a question you can answer correctly, and then take that opportunity to ask him what you really want to know, ignoring everything else he said. Well, it's not that simple. The devil will never give you an easy question, one that you can be completely sure of the answer to. He may instead give you questions you have some vague knowledge of, that you think maybe you know the answer to, but aren't really confident. thus forcing you to endlessly second-guess yourself, obsessing over whether or not you can trust the information that he gave you next. So I'm thinking that like Monty Python thing, where they're just like, what's your favorite color? Blue. I mean, shit. You know?
No, yellow, or whatever. I forget what the...
Perhaps you'll think that what he said was a lie, wish it was a lie, but be eternally consumed by doubt, unable to fully convince yourself that you were wrong. Or perhaps you'll have to make a huge choice based on the information that he gave you, and be tormented by fear and indecisiveness as you realize that your fate, and perhaps that of others as well, rests entirely upon whether or not you were able to correctly recall some arcane piece of trivia that you don't even remember now. You'll also never remember the exact questions the devil asked you, by the way. That would make it too easy for you to go back and check on your responses. Or maybe instead of testing your knowledge, he'll ask you something personal, something you even lie to yourself about. You'll answer back to him thinking you've gotten the question correct. No, for example, no, I don't resent my sister. Yes, I would turn the money into the police, but he'll know better. He'll know better than you do that you're lying, and he'll lie to you in return. And you'll believe him. You'll believe him until you are no longer able to deceive yourself, and by then it might be too late. Or maybe he won't even give you a chance to get an accurate response at all. Maybe he'll just ask you an endless string of completely impossible questions, making you more and more frustrated and disheartened as you'll realize you'll never be able to force him to tell you the truth. Questions like, what was the exact height of Mount Everest in centimeters in the year 1666? Or what is the airspeed velocity of an unladen swallow? Which is, hey, I like this guy.
Hey, call. Yeah.
This devil guy has the good questions. Although, knowing his sense of humor, if he ever asked the latter, he might consider African or European a correct response. The devil, noted Monty Python lover.
He was a member of the cast. A lot of people don't know that. But...
Favorite movie, Life of Brian. There are a couple ways to short-circuit this particular strategy, however. Additional rules and courses of action that make the game more interesting and prevent you from being stonewalled completely. Although, in all honesty, he probably wants for you to try one of those options anyway. The first option is to ask him a riddle instead of a question. If you somehow manage to stump him and he answers the riddle wrong or gives up, he'll be obligated to give you a truthful response to your next question. If he answers the riddle correctly, once again, don't worry, he won't pounce on you like a sphinx or drag you into hell. What will happen is that he will get a pass, allowing him to lie in response to one question he would otherwise be obligated to answer truthfully. Honestly, if he gets a pass, you might as well just give up and quit the game right there. It's nearly impossible to determine when he's telling you the truth under the best of conditions. Adding another layer of complexity by constantly trying to figure out when and if he's used his pass, it's about enough to make any normal person's brain explode. There's no way. Just forget it. This is a lot of work for a conversation that even the author is like, I don't know why you'd want to talk to him, but if you do, here's how you do it, and here's all the shit you have to do.
You said that he could give you the winning lottery numbers for the, like, $500 million.
That's literally it. And I would rather just fucking guess than go through this.
Well, but the safest part about that, well, that's the thing, is you go through it and it's like, but the devil might lie to you. It's like, oh no, I just wasted $2. Like, that's about the safest thing you could ask him. Because, yeah.
The second option is for you to take a dare from him. If you accept it and vow to follow through.
Truth or dare with the devil now? That's great.
Dare, kiss me on the lips. It's like, God damn it. These dares suck. If you accept it and vow to follow through, then once again he'll have to answer your next question truthfully. If you choose instead to reject it, he'll get another pass. Now, before you freak out and reject that whole idea completely, you should know that he won't ask you to do anything overly dramatic or unspeakably evil, like blow up a hospital or murder somebody. As a rule of thumb, most dares won't involve direct loss of life or any major felonies. You'll be out of jail in 6 months, tops. However, they certainly won't be easy, inflicting severe pain on yourself, doing something that terrifies the shit out of you, cutting off a treasured relationship, publicly humiliating yourself or someone you love. All of these things and more, things you might not even be able to imagine, are completely on the table. If you're willing to go that far, to put yourself in that kind of position, you'll get your answer. However, if he manages to come up with the one thing you know you simply can't or won't do, well then once again you might as well just quit. One last thing. Don't think you can just tell him what you're going to do. Don't think you can just tell him you're going to do something and then not do it. If you accept a dare and then don't follow through with it, well, let's just say there will be consequences. Just suck it up and keep your promise no matter what it was. Trust me, you're better off that way. Finally, when you've either gotten the information you wanted or given up on it completely, you may end the ritual by simply thanking the devil for accepting your request, bowing politely at the waist, and bidding him farewell. The surface of the mirror will seem to swim and flicker for a moment, and then you will be looking at your own reflection again. Only when you are absolutely certain you're looking into your own two eyes again may you turn away from the mirror, flick the lights back on, and begin dismantling your protections. Now, and this is important, even if you haven't gotten the information that you wanted, you must end the ritual in this manner before 66 minutes have elapsed. Well, I suppose that technically you have 66 minutes and 6 seconds. I know, subtle, right? But if you're seriously going to try to cut it that close without any kind of timekeeping device, you're probably screwed anyway. I cannot emphasize enough how important it is that you keep to this time limit. I'll save the reason behind that for the end, but don't skip ahead. I've still got a few important tips on how to play. Be careful what sort of personal information you give out. Try not to talk about yourself. The devil doesn't need your social security number, especially your emotions and problems, any more than absolutely necessary. This guy knows human psychology like the back of his hand, and he will get inside of your head. It's like talking to Hannibal Lecter. Give him enough to work with, and even if you don't believe a single word he says, he will still find ways to fuck with your mind like nobody's business. If anything he asks makes you even remotely uncomfortable, do not hesitate to lie through your teeth. There will be plenty of other questions. On a similar note, try to avoid the game on track, or try to keep the game on track and moving briskly. Unstructured interactions of any kind are to be avoided. Chances are that at some point he will try to draw you off on a tangent, discussing something that fascinates you, analyzing a response you've given him, or finding some other excuse to speak at length without moving the game forward. This is not only a waste of valuable time, but also another excellent opportunity to mess with your head. If you choose to give him a riddle, use one you've made up yourself. If your riddle has ever been written down anywhere at all, from the pages of The Hobbit to some long-lost tomb of ancient magic, he will already know the answer. That said, it still has to be a legitimate riddle, with an answer that makes logical sense from some angle. You can't just ask something like, what's green, has 10 legs, and hops, then claim for some inexplicable reason that the answer was marshmallows. Nor can you ask him a straight question like, what have I got in my pocket? He probably knows that anyway. There are no hard and fast rules to determine whether a riddle makes sense or not, but you're a reasonable human being. Your ancestors ate from the tree of knowledge. Please, for the love of crap, use common sense. If you choose to take a dare, there is a slight chance that the devil will ask you to do something seemingly easy. Deliver a letter, for instance, or scribble a 10-digit number in a public restroom stall. If he does not ask you for something like this, and you even have a shred of common decency in you, or if he does ask you for something like this, and you even have a shred of common decency in you, do not accept. Chances are that he's using you to further some sinister plot, one liable to ruin a lot of lives and harm a lot of people. Who knows, maybe you're the type of person who really doesn't mind throwing an unknown number of total strangers under a bus to find out what you want to know, but at least be aware that is what you're doing. Last but not least, be very aware of time. It might be helpful to do some practicing beforehand and get a feel for how long an hour is without a watch. The devil will probably put off discussing the things you're most keen to find out for as long as he can, and as you near the 66-minute deadline, he'll start trying harder and harder to distract you, and otherwise keep you playing until it's too late. He'll string you along.
So we'd both be screwed because we cannot keep to a time.
We're already fucked. Like... We're already over a half an hour. Right. I don't think I'll get through these instructions in 66 minutes. He'll string you along, feed you little glimmers of false hope, keep you thinking, just a few more minutes, I'm almost there. Don't fall for it. Don't go over the time limit, no matter what. Now, you might be thinking that this game really doesn't sound all that dangerous so far. Threats of psychological damage rarely seem to carry the same weight as threats of physical damage, even though their costs are often just as great. Hate to burst your bubble, but the game is far from safe. There are plenty of ways for you to seriously screw yourself over both physically and mentally, not to mention spiritually. And it is with these I will conclude in the vain hope that they make some sort of impression. First, while you are speaking with the devil, do not let him out of your sight. Keep staring into the mirror no matter what happens. He will undoubtedly try various tricks to make you look away. You will hear noises behind you, feel eyes on the back of your neck, see shadowy phantoms writhing in the depths of the mirror. A cold breath will blow upon you from behind, smelling like the crypt. A deep silence will settle, only to be interrupted by a loud smack directly behind your head, giving you about the worst jump scare you've ever had. Hell, the devil may even abandon a measure of his own dignified facade and give a sudden jump of feigned shock, shouting loudly and pointing behind you with a very convincing look of terror on his face. Whatever he might test you with, you must not look away from him. If you look away, if you lose sight of him completely, even for 1 second, you will look back at the mirror to find him gone. Well, not gone, out of the mirror, in the room, with you. Exactly how much of your body the police will find the next morning, and what state it's in, will depend entirely on the sort of mood he's in. The same goes if you break any of the protections you laid down before the beginning of the ritual, interrupting the circle assault, letting the red string unwind, knocking over a candle, or letting one go out. Any of these things will free him from the mirror, and then, well... You're all a bunch of creative horror junkies. I'm sure you can fill in the blanks. On a different topic.
No, I really can't.
What's he do?
Specifics of what the...
He'll make you shit. He'll make you shit yourself. That's all.
He'll do that thing where he says, stop hitting yourself. Stop hitting yourself. On wet willies and stuff.
He'll give you
It's terrible.
He'll dunk you in the toilet and keep dunking. On a different topic, you may reach a point in the game, probably after a long series of maddeningly impossible questions, where the devil asks you the deceptively simple question, what is your full name? You must not give it to him. Names can be things of great power, although the devil will, of course, already know your name. Telling it to him yourself is akin to inviting a vampire into your home. Your name is deeply synonymous with your own inner self. Thus, giving him your name is powerfully symbolic of giving him yourself. If you are foolish enough to make this mistake, all of your protections will be for naught, and he will seize upon your unwitting offer with malicious glee, stealing away your soul and dragging it back with him into hell. At least this way the police will find a complete, identifiable body. As a matter of fact, your vacant shell will be totally unblemished, seemingly having dropped dead of sheer terror. Last but...
He must have exhausted himself and had a heart attack after carrying this mirror through that second-story window.
It's a classic case of a man breaking into a building and setting up a nice mirror, and his heart just couldn't take how good he looked.
That's right.
Last but certainly not least, there's the matter of what happens if you go over the time limit. This is inarguably the worst thing you can do. You won't think so at first. The devil will give you no indication that you have in fact exceeded the time limit, and you will conclude the ritual as if nothing had gone wrong. Perhaps as the devil's image in the mirror trembles and gives way, you'll see a particularly nasty, triumphant smirk flash across his face, but this will be easily dismissed as your imagination. You'll turn the lights back on, gather your belongings, and go to leave the room, but when you open the door you will see nothing. That's right, nothing. Just a flat, white void extending infinitely in all directions. Only the room
Well, then you're seeing something. You're seeing a flat, white void.
No, it's nothing. It's
that's
the absence of something.
See, that's like the problem. Is he would drag me to hell like this, and then I'd be arguing semantics with myself, and he'd be like, "Fuck, I don't want this guy."
God,
like,
you can't torture this guy without getting into every technicality. Fuck. Only the room which was reflected in the mirror will now exist. Incidentally, if you turn back around to face the mirror again, you may catch a glimpse of your own reflection. Perhaps it'll even turn and favor you with a smirk and a cheeky wave before sweeping out the door into the perfectly normal church hallway outside. As you may have already figured out, you yourself are no longer in the church. Your soul is now trapped in the mirror, and the devil has taken the liberty of possessing your body now that you are no longer using it. Pound on the glass and scream all you like, you'll never get out on your own, and no exorcist can help you. But don't worry, it's not like you're in hell, right? At least, not necessarily. What you have to understand, see, is that a human soul stripped bare of its flesh is a deeply volatile and vulnerable thing, especially when trapped in the land of the living. You are now an entity of purely mental properties, and as such, the barriers between what is real to you and what is imaginary have been completely dissolved. As you fill that reflected room with your anger, your sorrow, your fear at being trapped, these emotions will begin to coalesce, given form by your mind. If you're not particularly imaginative, these creatures may not be too terrible, may not be able to inflict too much horror and pain. With time, you may even be able to teach yourself to get rid of them. If, however, yours is a mind haunted by monsters, a mind that is vibrantly creative and imaginative, and more than usually twisted, well, there's no telling what horrors might come clawing their way out of the maelstrom, tasting sweet release from the confines of your subconscious, hungering for your terror and suffering. They will refuse to be banished, dragging you kicking and screaming into an endless positive feedback loop of pain and fear. Needless to say, if you're a regular patron of websites like this, you're probably pretty fucked. There's only one way to find release from the mirror and the world that you've created therein. They say that if you call it to the devil once more and ask him to free you from the mirror, he'll be willing to take you out. For the usual fee, of course. Who knows, maybe if your imagination is twisted and powerful enough to create a personal hell that leaves you begging for the real thing, those talents might be put to good use. There are over 7 billion people in the world, after all. Even the devil himself can't be messing with all of their minds at once. Talented help is always appreciated. Of course, the corollary to your being trapped inside the mirror is that your devil now gets to do whatever he wants in your body until sunrise. At around that time, your body will mercifully drop dead from the strain of the possession. Autopsy will probably identify the cause as some sort of coronary event. Don't get too relieved, though. He's perfectly capable of stirring up plenty of trouble in those few hours. For instance, he may decide to do something big and dramatic, like purchase a large meat cleaver and go on a murder spree, starting with the names in your address book and working his way out to complete strangers if he has time. Or perhaps he'll focus on only one person, someone who trusts you completely, using your persona to get him or her alone and vulnerable, and then, well, no need to describe it here. Once again, I'm sure you can think of a few things. Starting to see why I called this the worst outcome yet?
Steve, what are you doing? Why are you trying to get me to buy a timeshare? No.
That's the thing. He'll use your body to get into advertising. Of course, there's also a chance he won't lay a finger on any of your loved ones, instead deciding to do something a little more subtle, more insidious, like drop off a few nondescript, unmarked packages on certain doorsteps in the dangerous part of town, or locate a particularly dusty, aged yellow text in the storeroom of your local library and intentionally misfile it in the young adult literature section, or whisper 7 very choice words into the ear of the distracted-looking young redhead waiting for the 3 a.m. subway train. Or maybe he'll decide that, in this age of waning superstition, not enough people are getting interested in his games, and the knowledge of them is in danger of being lost. Maybe he'll decide he needs to get the word out a bit more, do a bit of networking, attract some new suckers. Challengers. Maybe he'll take a quick peek at your browser history, see where the impressionable, curious minds are hanging out these days. It's like the dad trying to understand his son.
Yeah, and I love how much of, like, the story wavers on the devil having, like, all this, like, I know that they said he's not all-knowing, but, like, he's super smart, but he has to spy on your browser to see where the kiddos are hanging out.
He has
like,
all this fucking... Okay. He's like all powerful. He can get you winning lottery numbers. He just doesn't know what this CBD stuff is about, you know? Maybe he'll even write a quick tutorial in modern parlance rather than some inscrutable, obsolete, demonological text. Post it on the internet and see how many bites he gets. Maybe I really shouldn't have gone there, but if you made it this far without shying, a little twist at the end isn't going to put you off, is it, dear reader? I'm sure there are plenty of intrepid adventurers among you with burning questions you'd like answered. And you're all a smart bunch. You know the pitfalls. You know the conversation. You know the conventions. You live and breathe this sort of thing, do you not? There's no way you'd fall into any of the obvious traps, right? You're not some Dick or Jane off the street, after all. You'd be bringing a whole new level of competition. You would... Oh, excuse me, just a moment. I think I hear someone calling for me. What? You want out that badly already? Must be one hell of an imagination you got on you. Perfect.
Dun, dun, dun. I like that the devil... typed that last part.
Well, he wrote all of it. That's the twist.
I know, that's the thing, but I mean the very last part, like, where he's like
the conversation.
Yeah, what? You went out already? Type.
Yeah, I think I actually really liked that one.
Yeah, I liked the twist because it was one of those. It's like, okay, this is this long set of instructions, and there's plenty to pick apart there, like we did.
Yeah.
And then they get to the end, and I admit that he lulled me away from that twist, and then you see it coming, but just in time for it to make you like the payoff, not one of those payoffs that.
I don't think. I think if you're genuinely. It goes into like cheesy horror with that ending of like, what, you want out already? Like, cause it's like, okay, I get it. You just made, you completed the twist. And
that's the thing is it would have been 1,000 times stronger, but it's that typical thing. And it's one of those, this isn't we're going to make fun of this guy cause he's or girl or whatever. We're going to make fun of this person because they fell into this trap where you undermine your reader's intelligence. Like, you want to make sure they get the point, because that's something that like 99% of like Hollywood writers and TV writers and a lot of people do that, because as an author, you think of this neat twist and you want to make sure it's not missed, but you really, really weaken it by throwing that last sentence in there. If they would have lobbed that off, it would have been a really, really perfect ending.
Yeah.
But
I do, it's still a really good twist, like
and it was
because you go through that whole set of instructions and it kind of sets up this rule set to this game, and then what I really liked about that ending is how it kind of makes you feel like, oh shit, I'm already way too deep, and he just like kind of revealed like, hey, you're already in this a little bit, like you're not playing the game, but it's like fuck, he wrote it. Right.
And it got that, and it kind of makes you, it does two things well. And as I burp into the mic, because professional.
we don't do our thing well. No, I belched like 3 times in this story.
Okay. It does two things well. The first thing is it really sets you up at the beginning, like making you feel like, oh, these things are all stupid. Like, how could anybody fall for this? And like, why are they like undermining, like, oh, if you're dumb enough to try this and blah, blah, blah. And then like towards the end, that makes it come off as like a really good way to like, if it was the devil writing it, be like, oh, you don't really want to try this, do you? Like, it's kind of baiting you.
Yeah.
And you don't see that from the beginning. So I like that. But the other thing it does really well is, like I said, it's an ending you see coming, but you see coming like halfway through the last paragraph or so, or maybe the beginning of the last paragraph, which is important because when you have if you have a twist ending that you don't see coming at all, and that's that like cliche, and then I woke up and it was a dream, and it's like, you can't have it. There has to be that moment just ahead of the reveal where the reader goes, aha, because it makes your reader feel smart and go, oh shit. Like,
and then one paragraph from there, it's like, oh shit, but now it doesn't matter that I found that out because in some way I'm already playing this game, you know?
And that's a really hard balance to get. He's an example because it's the one that most people know, and I'm not the biggest fan, but I've been listening to a collection of short stories from Stephen King. If you haven't heard of the guy, he writes some horror stuff, little stuff here and there. He's written a couple books.
No pastas of the month, but, he's climbing that creepypasta ladder.
And one of my complaints, and it's something that he made, because I don't know a lot about the guy, and like I said, I don't love his work, but it's good. Like, I don't hate it either, but there's just things. But one of the things that I think he struggles with, at least in these short stories, is just that. Like, there's been a whole lot of them that, like, you listen to and you're not sure where they're going, then you think they do, then he pulls off this really cool twist, and you're like, wow, that was amazing. And then he adds two more, like, I don't want to call them chapters because they're short stories, but yeah. And then you're like, oh, well, and by the end, you're like, yeah, that was pretty neat. But you understand if you had ended that 2 chapters ago, it would have been brilliant. And you took it from brilliant to very good. Now, that's my opinion because a lot of people think he's brilliant and he's made a brilliant amount of money. But my point is, it's really neat that this creepypasta writer kind of pulled it off in a way that I actually like. Like we said, other than that last sentence. But whatever, that's a common pitfall there.
Yeah, I mean, I could dismiss that as kind of like a stylistic choice a little bit. But we've talked about it pretty much every time we do these stories, is like, I think you and me are both sort of, when it comes to fiction, and especially horror fiction, we're kind of less is more. Where, like, the more you leave to the reader's imagination, the more effective it is. And this kind of goes to what we were talking about last week, where it's like, I would say in Stephen King is maybe the biggest example of it all, where it's like, some people really fucking need an editor. and they need an editor who they will actually listen to. Because I agree, like, Stephen King has a hell of an imagination, but a lot of his books could be, you could cut a third out and the story would not be hindered.
Yeah,
like, he's very indulgent in every aspect of the world he creates, and it kills the pacing of his stories for me.
Yeah, not just the pacing, but the ending. For instance, this will kind of spoil one of the short stories, but I don't even remember the title. But basically, this character gains an ability to kind of see the future, and it's more subtle than that. But finds out that his girlfriend and a bunch of people are going to die in this horrible accident. And even though it was warned, like, you can see the future, but don't you dare, like, change the future. Of course, he changes the future because he doesn't want his girlfriend to die in a horrible accident. And then they kind of end that chapter on this ominous, like, oh, thank God she's alive, but I know I broke this rule and there's probably going to be consequences. And you're like, yeah, and that's kind of that, like, you're getting into Twilight Zone territory. If you would have just kind of ended it there, like, with just this foreboding sense of, what did I actually do? Like, that leaves it to your imagination, and that's really cool.
Yeah.
Instead, it goes on to the next chapter where he gets, like, visited by 2 time cops that end up basically scolding him and, like, doing all this and then taking away his ability to see the future and being like, don't do that again. We're out of here. And it's like, what the fuck was that? Like,
you know what? That's... I applaud that one. Like, just 2 random time cops. Like,
okay.
Well, I almost see that story as like he built that ending and had to make a plot up to that.
Well, and that could be because there's more to it than that. And it actually, I know it's all, that whole story ends up as kind of this nod or a wink to the Dark Tower series, but I don't know anything about the Dark Tower series other than it exists. But I know because it says up front, that's one of the fun things about this collection. If I knew what it was called, I'd plug it. But before each story, Stephen King, it's an audiobook, but he gives like a little intro and like, oh, this is how I came to think of this story or this or that, or, you know, there's a little bit of author input before the stories. And he mentioned that it technically these like time cops, I think, are kind of part of that Dark Tower universe. So I guess if you're a bigger fan and you've read those books, maybe that ending would have hit harder, but it was like, you took it from what it could have been a really cool psychological ending to like this like weird
kind of
X-Files.
A cheesy,
yeah. And again, we with the same caveat that we give to creepypasta writers, I'm not saying Stephen King is bad. Clearly, that would be extremely egotistical of me to claim one of the most successful horror writers like in the last 50 years is bad. Actually, I hate when people do that, but it doesn't jive with me particularly.
Yeah.
Although I will say I like his short stories. All right, you know, they're entertaining.
I mean, yeah, nothing's perfect. No writer is perfect. And Stephen King, I think, for a lot of stylistic issues I might have with his writing, there's something to be said about a guy who has managed to keep like being that creative and that imaginative for as long as he has been. Like,
and he's smart. I mean, I don't necessarily know, like, oh, you would go to him for advice smart, although I get the impression that he's a pretty deep thinker. But I mean, he sets up some, like, really good plots and just, ideas that you would never, ever think of. Like I say, even that story, even though I kind of gave away the ending there, if you happen to come across it, there's way more to it that makes it way more interesting than that.
Yeah.
And then he has this other thing that with his short stories that they start off really stupid. Like say, I listen to him when I walk in the morning. So every time a new one starts, like the first, they're usually about an hour long, audio wise. And for the first like 20 minutes, and this is broke up over a couple days, but I'm like, this story sucks. I missed the last one. And then by the end, you're like, oh, I can't believe that just ended. And then the next one starts like, this one sucks. I missed that last one. So he kind of like lulls you into the story. So I like that. But I do have to say congratulations to this creepypasta author for like being the first one that I'm trying to like compare you to Stephen King.
I really like this one. Even with that cheesy ending, like I think it does such a good job like lulling you into like the rules. And so much of how that's written, like it's written really matter-of-factly, but naturally and stuff. And then like to have it kind of, because that is how I would imagine the devil fucking with you. It wouldn't be,
no, certainly.
It wouldn't be, you know, this elaborate, you know, horror movie thing. He would do it in some fucking subtle way of like, he would speak to you in your own words, you know, like, he would be on the internet writing some shit that you would be absorbing and obsessing over. So like I think that's a really effective twist. And I think that's a really hard thing to do in horror. As we've done these creepypasta episodes, so many of them, like even like how many, I've lost track of how many of them where we say like, well, that's a really strong idea. And then usually by the end, it's like, maybe it's not the worst ending in the world, but you know, it's not the best payoff either.
Yeah, I was going to say they're very rarely satisfying. And I don't mean satisfying from the protagonist wins. That in horror, most of the time a satisfying ending is when the protagonist loses, but in an interesting way.
Yeah.
And that's what I was going to say when you were talking about this one and the setup and the very matter of fact. I think what got me with it is it did have me, and I don't know now if it's because I'm getting more and more, you know, acquainted with creepypasta. I didn't even know what it was until you brought him to the show.
I brought this shit up.
But we've done a bunch of shows on it, and I've read a few, and so it really had me expecting the cliche creepypasta ending, and it didn't. So I don't know if that's intentional or if that's just me being like assuming where it was going. But
well, it does. I think what's so effective about that twist is like it's because we come at it out of it at the end, like fucking of course that of course the devil was writing it the whole time.
And it adds this wrinkle where maybe you don't need to bring your own full-length mirror, but that's where he's fucking with you some more. He's just like, not only I'm going to...
If you had a hand mirror, he couldn't get through it.
Well, or it'd be the same, but he's just like, I'm going to not only make these people summon me, but I'm going to watch them struggle with a full-length mirror first, because it's funny. Like,
but just like the reason why you don't think that is how it's written up to that point. It's very natural. Like, and that's something that I have to compliment him on, is like, it sounded sentence to sentence genuine. You know, and that's where turning it into like, oh, the devil wrote the whole thing is actually like a really effective lie, because it really did read across as like some dude like giving you tips to how to survive this weird fucking interaction.
I would say more than that. It not only it sounded like that while you were reading it initially, but then looking back on it, it feels more like, well, did it sound genuine, or did it sound like the devil trying to make it sound genuine? Like, it was really, really, I liked it.
Yeah. So, it's a big 2 thumbs up from me.
We get off of here, I'm going to
Google
churches in my area and find out which ones are in the darkest spots that are easiest to break into, because I want to put this whole story to the test, but. Like I said, my fat ass would be breaking into a church's chicken. That way, even if it doesn't work, or even if it works and I get doomed to eternal damnation, at least I got some chicken.
I would love the devil appearing and then like just seeing you stuffing your face and like, God damn it.
He's just sitting there like, come on, aren't you going to ask me questions? It's like, nope. No.
What if you just like, he wants to play games, but like, what if you just want somebody to play like Magic the Gathering with or something? It's like there's no stakes or anything. It's just like, nope, you're going to play with me for 1 hour.
Well, yeah. Or what if it's like, all right, if you win, you get an answer. Name your game. And I'm like, all right, man, patty cake.
All right, Mega Man speedrun race. Let's go.
He knows I can't get through Wily's castle.
He knows I'll fuck him up. Is what he knows. We fucking do that shit.
Or you do, well, no, I was going to say do what I said and be like, he's like, name your game. And you go, Monopoly. And he goes, I don't want to fucking play that. That game sucks.
Here, no, he would actually be down for that because it would take way longer than an hour and you would be fucked.
Right. Yeah. That's where I realized the flaw in that plan.
Yeah. See, the Mega Man race thing, I can beat that game in under a half an hour and just embarrass him. So.
Devil went down to Washington looking for a soul to steal. You've got your regular controller. He's got a golden NES controller.
He's got the Power Glove.
Yeah. And that's they said that he can appear as different things. So he appears as the kid from The Wiz.
But the Power Glove's a piece of shit, so he can't get anything to work.
Damn it!
It's like, why won't he jump the full height? What the fuck?
I press jump. There's lag. It's not fair.
I do believe Nintendo could make a piece of hardware that would frustrate even Satan himself.
I believe that not only could they, but they have.
They have like the Virtual Boy.
Right. Why is everything fucking red?
It's giving me a headache. I gotta lie down.
You win. Whatever you want.
Hey, that was an extra long episode, but I think that story was worth it. So,
I do too.
Yeah. Thanks for listening. We'll be back at it with more shit at a later time.
Or will we?
Or will we? Ba ba ba.
Sounded like you said, or Willie.